come on up and have a seat, get coffee, get fruit, get something to munch on, and get ready to talk. Don't be passive today, this morning. Be ready to talk. And while we're doing that, why don't we just quickly introduce ourselves? If you could introduce yourself by name and what your work is in Beaver County or anything else regarding Beaver County. So
you're looking at me.
I am, Jean.
Yeah, Jean, do you need me to take?
Why not? Let's do the microphone.
I'm Jean Barsati from the Carnegie Library in Beaver Falls.
I'm the director. Don't worry about it.
I'm also associated with the library, but my main reason to be here could be the mean reason too. Main reason to be here is that I am with River Communities Fiduciary Services, along with the next gentleman.
I'm with him, but I'm not mean. So, my name's Eric O'Connor. I'm with
It's hot in here.
Fiduciary Services.
This thing really.
Consultants.
Huh? Really? Well, I gotta
Peter Birchler.
I gotta drop it down because I get too warm.
So I'm a chiropractor.
These chairs great. Like we don't even have to stand up. All right, so I'm Jo Marie Henry. I'm owner and director of Bullfrogs and Butterflies Child Care Center in New Brighton.
Good morning, my name is Donna Dobbs. I am a life and relationship and leadership coach with Truth at Life, coaching and consulting, and I also own my own firm, which is just launching, called River Tree Coaching.
All right.
I'm Tom Stein. I'm the Associate Pastor at Chapel Presbyterian Church in Brighton Township, and I'm an instructor at Geneva College.
Thank you.
My name is Barnabas Chamberlain. I graduated from Geneva, and right now I work with a company called Anacon, who deals with facility maintenance repair.
Hi, my name is Victor Novich. I'm with the Legal Shield Identity Theft Corporation.
I'm Carla Iacobello, and I'm currently retired, but I also am councilwoman from Frankfort Springs and former chairman of the Republican Committee of Beaver County.
All right.
I'm Cindy Monaco. I work for McCarles Incorporated. I'm a contract administrator, proposal coordinator, but I'm also on the prayer breakfast committee for Beaver Falls Prayer Breakfast. Just a reminder that this year it's on Thursday, May 4th, up at Geneva in Alexander Dining Hall. And hope everyone could come. And
Thank you.
Mark Meyer this year and Larry Betancourt are going to participate.
Wonderful.
Uh-oh. What are the dates again?
Thursday, May 4th.
May 4th, okay.
Yeah.
It's probably on my calendar, but
Good morning, I'm Shelley Plummer. I am the office manager at FedEx Supply Chain.
Good morning, Caitlin Pletty with the Beaver County Chamber of Commerce.
Hi, good morning. I'm Brad Davis, Director with Civil Engineering at Larson Design Group.
Good morning. I'm Lance Grable with the County of Beaver.
I'm
nice.
Rebecca Mansko. I'm a Potter Township Supervisor. I'm Mary Lou Haryu. I'm with Life Beaver County and the Life Programs of Lutheran Senior Life.
Hi, I'm Mark Miner. I'm publisher of the book Forged in Steel. I also have a marketing communications company which is turning 15 this year.
All right.
And I'm Don Maloa. I'm retired military, and I'm the account supervisor for attorneys Reed, Tosh, Wolford, and Douglas.
And that's why we always salute when we go by dawn, is to keep things. No, that's all right. 3 up and 3 down, right? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Braving this wonderful spring weather that we've been having. So we're glad you're here. Did you want to make any comments before we get going, Aaron? Go ahead. You were looking that way.
I'm also the Vice President of Leaders Serving Beaver County. So this is a really interesting time of the year because, we see we have, old man winter, kicking and screaming because we've got the closet door open and we're ready to shove them in there for the next 8-9 months. We also have, the birds chirping, and the trees are starting to bud, and, the seeds are starting to sprout as well. And, really that's where we are at as an organization, with Leaders Serving Beaver County. And, we had a great board prior to us that really planted the seed, and, and gave us a nice foundation here to kind of build upon. And you're starting to see some of the changes of what we're going to, evolve into, and we're going to be meeting after here, to kind of talk a little bit more about that, about, what we're going to be doing. What does it mean to be a member of Leaders Serving Beaver County on the different types of membership levels that we have. And so, one of the changes that we made is, this is a free event. We used to charge an entry fee or whatever, and we wiped that away. We are asking for donations though, and the reason why we're doing it that way is because we do have a Patterson grant. It's a matching grant, so whatever donations you give to us, it's going to be matched dollar for dollar by the Patterson Foundation. So, we encourage you guys to, we've got donation buckets sitting around, so please help us in that area as well. But, and the other great thing about this time of the year is, after, spring gets going, we get to celebrate not the death of, our King, but the resurrection of our King. And, that's a wonderful time. So, I'll turn it back over here to Jim. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Again, we're so happy to have all of you here. And I hope that you are ready to engage in a conversation. Here we go. And so this morning, our 6th installment of 7, based on this book, Forged in Steel, is all about continuous improvement. So what's that mean to you as you come here this morning? You see the phrase, continuous improvement. What's on your mind with respect to that?
It's always happening.
It's always happening. And change is inevitable. Okay. Always learning new things. And Vic, thank you.
That's what God expects of us.
That's what God expects of us, to continuously improve. Okay. Anything else?
Reformed and always reforming.
Reformed and always reforming.
It takes a lot of work to make it improvement and not the opposite.
It takes a lot of work to
make it improvement
and not fall backward, and not backslide, not get worse. Yeah. It's what got you there won't necessarily keep you there, that kind of thing. Okay. Well, what are we going to do this morning? Learn the importance of deliberate practice and the purpose of process. If you read that chapter, you saw the word process. Discuss the importance of having the power of huddles and eye in the sky. Interesting terms. We're not huddling up here this morning. We're going to do a no huddle presentation. But that's part of the terminology of this chapter, and begin thinking about what's it take to create a plan to improve as one of the principles. Okay, so what I do in this presentation is I pull some quotes from the book that speak to the point they're trying to make. And this one is, it's the process, not the product, that can make you successful. So, once again, I ask you, what sort of meaning do you attach to that phrase? In the book, talking about the idea of process, not the product. What does that mean to you? Pardon me? Mindfulness. And what does that, could you tell us what you mean by mindfulness?
You watch what you do and ask yourself why you're doing what you're doing.
Okay.
And just pay attention to what it really is, to stop and pause for a moment to go, you do this all the time.
Yes.
Is it going to give you the same result as you did the last time, or if you want the result to change, is what you're doing in your process?
And so it's an awareness. That mindfulness, a word we're hearing more and more of. This idea of being aware of what's going on with you at that particular time. by having that sort of step back, pause. Yeah. What else? Yes.
In addition to the why that Gene mentioned, I would say the how we do something is extremely important. We are looking for outcomes, and we don't want to miss that, but how we get those outcomes matters.
Yes. Process matters, without question. What else does it mean?
Processes are causes and products are effects, so kind of the difference between, we all want an end result, but if you enjoy the process of attaining that result, you have fulfillment in addition to understanding that the one thing is just the result of all these other things that we call life or business or whatever.
And so achieving, that product, that final, in the book, of course, it would be around winning, doing well, playing well, winning. That's an event. That happened. We beat the Browns twice a year. I have a friend that says the Steelers will never be worse than 2-14. And when asked why, well, because we play the Browns twice a year. I once told that little joke at a meeting that I was in charge of about 120 some people at Lordstown that had union and for the first time ever management personnel in the union building, unbeknownst to me. So yeah, when I dropped that one, I had to scramble quickly and duck. No, I did it to get their attention, really. I knew that I was going to get a rise, although you're still kind of in that split territory when you're out there. Anyhow, winning, that's an event. Getting there is the process. It's a continuous kind of thing. And so in process, there is something going on, according to the book. That's according to this phrase, that it is process that somehow creates that event. And so we're focused on that. Getting better as a leader requires a commitment to the process of doing so. And so, again, I ask you, what does that mean? Making a commitment to the process. Why do we make a commitment to the process? Especially if you had a chance to read the chapter. Why is that? Yes, Rich.
The word process has a certain element of repetition to it, that you are doing the same thing, but you're constantly looking for ways to improve, even incrementally, what it is you're doing to continue either to deliver a consistent product or an improved product. Yeah. Because you've learned something from those small increments that you've done. And
again, putting it in the context of the book, we would call that practice. We practice. Tunch talks about how important it was for him to practice certain techniques to be an effective tackle. The tackle is the person on the end of the line, either left or right, and often feels like they're on an island. You know, that defensive end is, or that outside linebacker is going to come around and do everything he can to get by that tackle. And Tunch talks about how just a little shift, 2 inches this way and putting weight on the other foot made a difference, but he had to practice it. It didn't feel comfortable at first. He balked at this change that Chuck Noll wanted him to make. But once he got it, it worked. And that guy had a harder time getting around him. What else? Yes, somebody? Did I see a hand? What's the commitment? What's that all about? Why do you have to commit to the process? It says something about the process, doesn't it? It implies something about the process. Yes, Mark?
It doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good? Why?
It's really, you're working on your weak spots, and to work to improve those is very difficult.
Okay, and what's interesting is this whole idea of improvement often is, in these days, approached as working on your what, rather than your what, generally speaking. Working on your
weaknesses rather than your strengths.
In the case of the book, absolutely. he said, Chuck would always say, I know what you can do well. Work on the things that you stink at, that you're not good at. Now, we have a lot of literature in the development world and leadership development and things that have been written. Peter Drucker, Malcolm, what is it? Gladwell, the Gallup guy, who's no longer with Gallup. Where they talk about.
You need another.
What's that?
You need another cup too?
No, I got plenty of juice right now, so thank you very much. Appreciate that. So in any case, they talk about working on strengths. Don't waste a lot of time on your weaknesses. Work on your strengths and try to position yourself to use those strengths. Now, again, I'm just saying there is a little bit of difference of perspective. We know that in the case of Forged in Steel, in this chapter, we know that weaknesses are not good among football players because you could be exploited very easily because they watch the film and they know your weaknesses, and we can see that. Pardon me?
That's what Belichick does.
That's what Belichick does. Yeah, especially taping other people's practices, right? But in any case, I just want you to know that what we're talking about when we say continuous improvement, it may involve working on weaknesses, but some of our leading authors in the leadership development literature say, let's focus more on strengths and not spend an inordinate amount of times in areas where we know those aren't our gifts. Those aren't our strengths. Doesn't mean we ignore them. I'm just making the point. I'm not going to argue with Tunch and Damien in their absence about whether you should work on weaknesses or strengths, but in any case, there is some difference. This morning, we get into both areas. Rebecca?
I guess I don't see them as being at odds with one another.
Right.
Even in our areas of strength, in other words, if you're going to stick with a football analogy, the person in that position is gifted for that position. That doesn't mean they cannot improve. They're building from strength, really. And does it always feel good? No, because there's some building to be done. But I'm not sure those are really at odds with one another.
Well, again, I don't want to get bogged down in this at all. I just wanted to mention it in passing. If you read Drucker, if you read Malcolm, if you read some of the others, what they're saying is, look, strength finders, here are your gifts. Here's where you seem to be endowed. Here's where your interests are in terms of the best, the greatest. Spend time getting better in those areas and not grieving and in agony over, oh, I'm weak in this area and I'll be no good until I'm the best and the greatest in that area. That's the message is we tend to think in terms of I got to get better in this area. I've got to overcome this weakness. They kind of flipped the thing around by saying, okay, acknowledge that, but really spend most of the time, if you will, getting better at what you're really good at. And thereby position yourself. Now that's, again, if your comment is on that, that's good. Mary Lou, last one, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking about in the workplace and being in a position in which you have strengths and that you're good at. And I sort of was thinking about, since my husband works at a golf course, a golf swing. When you
Don't say golf right now.
when you swing and you do it right, you know because it feels perfect.
I feel that a lot, actually, when I'm...
And it's easy and the ball goes where you want it to go. And,
Right.
but sometimes, when you're trying to work on something and it doesn't go well and you can feel that.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in your work. is I think sometimes we think we should be somewhere where God doesn't want us to be. And so we look at it as a weakness, like, okay, I'm not good at that, I need to get better at that so that I can be a manager or I can be an executive director, when maybe God wants you to be something different. And if getting better at what you're good at feels right, then maybe that's what you're meant to do.
Oh, sure. And if John Stanko were here, he'd start with purpose and focus, and he'd go until 9:30 without taking a breath.
Right.
Because that's what, what you're talking about. And so, and as people who are decision makers, then the responsibility should be finding the place where that person's strengths can flourish within the organization, not a position that does not take advantage of those strengths. And knowing individuals well enough to know that, boy, you really like doing this stuff, don't you? Yeah? Okay. We'll do everything we can to make sure that you have as much opportunity as possible to do just that. Because I get a feeling you don't really like doing some of the stuff you're doing right now. No, that's right. And so that awareness of others' giftedness and others' developmental place and need is important as well. Why is process important? And towards what end is the process aimed? Why is the process important? We've talked about process enough to get an idea of what we're thinking about. Why is that important? Rich?
In my original career in the men's clothing industry, the guy that taught me the business, his favorite saying was, once you learn how to do something right, you will never want to do it any other way.
Okay.
And so I think that goes a long way here, that once you have that process in place, even though you're going to tweak it, you're never going to back away from that, because you have found success there, and you build on that success.
Absolutely. By the way,
thank you.
Do you like what I'm wearing?
See how well
yeah, it's wonderful. Just Eric?
When we do financial planning for people, we always talk about the process as well. And the importance of that is it eliminates risk for the individual. So.
Yeah. Process implies what? In terms of this little thing right here. Time. Process means time. This developmental stuff that we're just starting to get into slowly but surely in this chapter of the book talks about time. Process is important because it takes time. And with that time comes even more than the actual benefit of what the final product may be, but just the experience of going through that process. Think again to the context of the book. And we can imagine that no matter what the end product of a particular set of practice techniques and all this might be, something else happens to players just by going through that grueling, I got to stick to this, I've got to be committed, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, in order to not just make the team, but get better. The process creates in itself, doesn't it, certain effects that benefit us. Stick-to-itiveness, courage, I'm not going to quit, goal orientation. I've learned to stick with it, and through all the ups and downs of this process that I committed myself to be a better leader. Whew. And those bumps have helped because I've learned just from that. And so we see process as important for a number of reasons. And towards what end is the process? Somebody said change. Joe Marie, remember you said change. Do you remember the context of that statement? Or has the coffee worn off and it's just too far back now to even?
Well, something that change is always happening, but it's a lot of work to get it to be improvement and not
Yeah.
going backwards.
Why are we doing this? Why are we doing the process? Why are we doing the process, Mark?
Build trust.
We build trust? How so?
Well, I think typically when we are practicing, we have somebody watching over our shoulder.
Oh, okay. So that's something we're going to get to as we go further. And by that, you're sort of talking about the benefit of having a what? When you say that?
An eye in the sky.
The eye in the sky, the coach, the person that is is aware of what's going on, and we'll get into that a little bit later in terms of feedback.
And I'll just add too, in the difference between working on your strengths and weaknesses, I think that corporate America today, regardless of who we work for, we don't have coaches walking around wanting to work with us on our technique. The Steelers employ tons of coaches, all football teams, basketball teams do. And I think this chapter, as Damien has said, is the single one value lacking in business today is that real-time mentoring and feedback giving when you are at work and just making those incremental changes elongated over time.
Yep.
But probably when some of the leadership experts talk about work on your strengths, because there's no time to work on your weaknesses. There's nobody there to give you the feedback in business.
And again, I think you mentioned something that's it's a virus that's infected business and economics this day, and that is the short-term perspective. It invades everything. We don't have that long-term perspective for a lot of reasons. We've got to make the numbers this quarter. We've got to make it happen now. We can't wait. And so there is that sense. And so again, what the process can produce change. What about what's going on? Yes, what were you going to say, Mike?
The process teaches approach, and so no matter what you're doing, whether you're working on a small project or tackling one of the biggest your company has ever done, it's how you approach doing that.
Absolutely.
And if you are able to instill the proper principles and values and things in even the smallest thing time and time again,
yes,
your team learns how to do that.
Sure.
And then they can do the big things well.
Yes. Well, absolutely. And I think that's a point that we've heard here this morning about the importance of understanding what somebody said. I think you may have said it. Sam's son. Son of Sam. I know his dad, Sam Birchler. You are Pete yes. Birchler. Yes.
No name tag. Sorry about that.
That's okay. You said something before, right, about process and product?
Yeah.
How you said?
Yeah, the process is a cause, the product is an effect.
Yeah, and the process has to be right, doesn't it? Yes, okay, go ahead.
So, policy, like talking about a company process, would process, policy of a company would be the same thing? Is there a correlation? The policy of a company is the process by which they fulfill their purpose?
Yes, but in the case of our focus today, what we're talking more is about this individual or it can be more collective, because leadership is we hope becoming more of a collective enterprise. But the idea that we're improving, the process refers to this idea of how do I get better at leading. But yeah, I mean, you're right. A process. Companies establish policies and processes to do whatever it is they do. But this process we're talking about is more this developmental journey that we're on. A couple of hands over here.
I was going to say the process gives you momentum as you move along through that practice. So as those hurdles come along later in the process, down the road, they become easier. Well, I might not say easier, but you can handle them
Yes.
better
Yes,
through that.
absolutely. Saw some other hands. Yes, Rebecca.
Process demands a plan,
Process demands a plan.
and in a good plan makes success repeatable,
Yes.
replicable.
Yeah.
Because built into the best kind of plan is the opportunity for the plan itself to change and to be changed to meet, current need. But I think it demands a plan.
Well, it does. And I'm amazed at how many of you have already seen this PowerPoint presentation. And because you're identifying some of the very things that we'll definitely get to. That's very important. And Damien and Tunch reiterate that point you just made. This has to be a planned thing. We want to change. That's something has to change to get better. Good to great. That book that hit the bookstores by in a huge wave, talked about the process of what is it that makes a company make that jump from going from good to great. Something changes. And those companies who don't make that jump remain only good in his eyes and even get worse. Yes?
Yeah. So process there's kind of two elements. So I believe the definition of the word has some connotation of moving forward. Right, so there's a movement, and there's also the time element.
Yes.
So the maximization of that process would be the most movement in the least amount of time, which would imply some type of efficiency in relation to business. I think the continuous improvement element. I think there are times in business where we can move forward quickly, and then you have plateaus where you
Sure.
have no apparent forward movement, and I think that's maybe normal. Yet I think the continuous improvement is that feeling of maybe not necessarily the most rapid change, but a continuous change. And on the topic of efficiency, and since this is a sports-related thing, what's the difference between maybe the way the Patriots do something and the way the Browns do something? They may both have a process, they may both be practicing, but one team may do it in a more efficient manner. And I've seen teams look at when they warm up or things like that. If a basketball team is warming up, how many times does the ball go through the hoop? How many shots are taken in that process versus another team? And you might find that they're all doing the same thing, but one has just a marginal edge.
Something else going on.
Efficiency or the rate at which the actual
Sure.
thing that they're trying to build is occurring. And I think in the world of business, a small amount probably gives you a significant competitive advantage or forward movement.
Absolutely. And you mentioned things like plateauing and this sort of natural trend that takes place that we see. And leadership, like human life, is complex. This is not some neat linear process that we can describe and say, all right, that's it. Anybody can do this. Let's go. And you check it off. Again, there are analogies, and of course that's what Tunch and Damien are doing. They're creating analogies between what Steelers do and what we do as people, as leaders. At some points, that works real well. At other points, and I'm sure they would admit, the connections are not quite one-to-one. Practice. If any of you have been in organized sports or coached, they are very organized, deliberate, time-sensitive, bang, bang, bang. You can, and I coached and I played, organized practices to be very deliberate, very time-sensitive, we move from here to here, very linear. We're going to start here and we're going to end here by the time we get to the showers. Human development, continuous improvement as an individual or leader is a little more complex than that. So we don't want to get, part of the message is process is challenging. It isn't predictable always. It isn't linear. Yes, Shelley.
So for me, I
would say you start with a vision, and as Rebecca said, you plan, you implement your strategy, and you learn, you grow, you improve to reach your fulfillment or your end result.
Yes, and I think that word vision is really important because you want to visualize what you want to be, who you want to become, and how you're going to get there. Strategy is, how do I get there? How am I going to make it? And so, yes, you plan and you try the best that you can to organize that process, knowing that in strategy we talk about something called, planned strategy and realized strategy. And one is what you had hoped to achieve, and the other is what you actually achieved, which is often different than the plan. So there's a flexibility, there's adjustments made when you start talking about strategy. But the idea of visioning where you want to end, what you want to look like, that's good. That's a good thing to, what kind of change are we talking about? We're talking about change now. And what are we talking about? I want to introduce something that may help us as we understand the complexity of leadership development. And that is, fundamentally, we're trying to change mindset, I think, in terms of how we understand leadership, in terms of how we understand the human experience, in terms of how we understand our mindfulness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Being mindful of our mindset. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point that you made. Now, take a look at that next statement. What sense do you make of that? What does that mean to you? What's that first sentence mean? You've heard of competency-based da-da-da-da-da, right? Developing competencies. Have any of you worked in an organization in which if you wanted to progress to a particular position, here are the competencies that you need to demonstrate for that? Have you ever seen that? Anyone? I've seen them. I've seen some incredibly intricate programs to create leadership succession within a company. And you have to sort of verify by whatever training and development programs they have internally or externally that you have demonstrated that capacity, that competency rather. This is different. Competencies are particular skills, and whether they are, skills and techniques for communicating, or skills and techniques for resolving conflict, or you name it, fill in the blank. Those are competencies. What does it mean to create greater capacity to understand the complexities of leadership? Yes?
I think it has a lot more to do about being rather than doing.
Being rather than doing.
So we talk about, in coaching, we talk about expansion and seeing the larger picture.
Expansion of?
Lots of things. Emotional intelligence, relationship skills, vision.
So, and so expanding your understanding of those things and how they work and all. Frances Hesselbein would be very happy with your first statement. That's if you know who Frances is. She's one who believes that leadership is more about who than what. Who are you, rather than what you do. Yeah. So there's a character piece that's built in there. But what we're talking about here is this idea that you expand your ability to understand what leadership really is. It isn't just a set of competencies that you check off. I got it. It's like Drucker said once, it's people, individuals who ever believe that if I lay out the competencies, anybody can do these. and do them well. Well, that's not true. Yes?
I was going to say, creating the capacity, like you said, competencies are the skills, and knowledge and all those kind of things. But to create greater capacity, you have to kind of stretch your comfort zone and put yourself in different situations so that you can see those skills and that knowledge kind of working.
That's right. And so now we get to the nature of the process for creating the kind of change we're talking about, right? Yeah, what is it that we engage in that we are able to create that? And for some it's called vertical development rather than horizontal development. And let me explain by using this vessel as an illustration. Horizontal leadership development, as people describe it, means stuffing more and more and more into this bottle. What happens as I stuff more and more and more and more into the vessel? Do you think? Pardon? It overflows, and so we're overwhelmed with all the stuff that we're getting because the vessel is still the same size. But when people talk about vertical development, it means I want a bigger bottle. I need a bigger bottle. That's that sense that we're talking about in terms of mindset. Creating the capacity, the ability to know and to understand and to realize and all those things. The mindfulness comment again. This has to get bigger. It has to vertically get bigger, if you will, so that it has the capacity to understand more and more about what leadership is, rather than trying to jam more and more competencies into the same sized bottle and overwhelm people in the process and not really make leaders effective. That's the old, people would say, that's been the traditional model of leadership development. Jam it in, jam it in, jam it in, jam it in. Competencies, 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 competencies. Rather than, let's work on the mind and how you think about leadership. Then we'll talk about specific competencies. And those competencies take on new meaning because you understand the context within which those competencies are exercised in a much, much better manner than you did before. So that's the idea. Becoming aware that there is a different way of doing things. That's number one. That's kind of what happens first. Oh, gee, I didn't know that. Isn't that interesting? I've seen that happen in the classroom in which I was engaged over the last 20 odd years. I'd see people, man, I never even thought about that. Whew. You got to be kidding me. And it really causes them to, I'm not sure what to do with that. And then what happens? And again, this is developing that mindset capacity. What do we start doing? What does it mean to challenge assumptions? What does that mean? What assumptions? Where are those assumptions? Where are they? In our mind. And so what do we do when it says we challenge assumptions? We analyze assumptions. What does that mean? What's that first thing? Oh, gee, there's a different way of doing things. I'm doing things based on assumptions that I have, right? About how to do things. And now I'm challenged with something that's different, looks different, smells different. Wait a second. That's different than the way I think. What's going on there when you begin to challenge your assumptions? What are you basically asking yourself?
Different perspective.
Pardon?
Perspective.
Perspective? Yeah, what's the question you might be asking yourself?
Am I doing it the right way?
Are my assumptions the correct ones? Because I'm getting some, whoo, wow. This is quite interesting. And so I'm wondering if my assumptions are correct about leadership. Gee, I thought leadership was about power and position and authority and all this kind of stuff. And I'm hearing that it's a whole different ball game. I got to think about that. You know, because I've based my last 10 years on position, authority, power, it's me or the highway, you know, that kind of approach. Holy mackerel, you're saying it's something else? Tested in practice. I didn't ask you about that. What's that? Well, come on. What's that mean? Tested in practice. That analysis, that critique, that trying to figure out what does it then mean? Testing them in practice.
Is it working?
Is what working?
My assumptions.
Are my assumptions working? And what are you literally doing? You're saying, okay, for the time being, let's just, for the sake of argument, mind, say that this new set of assumptions I got to pay attention to, okay? And so I'm going to play around a little bit. And what do I start doing? I start practicing behaviors based on what?
Okay, maybe I'm misunderstanding something. I thought you were testing your current assumptions.
You're practicing this new set of assumptions because you've seen a new, again, I'm the autocratic leader, top down, and I've been challenged by another set of assumptions about what leadership really is. And I'm in a quandary, and I'm working on it. I'm trying to deal with it. And if we're going to do leadership development, what we're going to encourage people to do is we're going to say, okay, why don't you try some things that you're not really committed to, intellectually, assumption-wise, in your heart. Practice. Try it. See what happens. See how people react. Are you with me? Shelley?
See as you do.
See as you do. What's going on? I remember a student in class after 3 or 4 weeks came in. I don't like it. It's not me, but I'm doing it. I'm trying those ideas that we're talking about, but that's not me. But I'm doing it. Yeah, what's going on? Well, I'm doing this. I'm talking to people about, how you doing and what you're trying to be more relational. That's not me. I'm all business. What's happening? They're not sure what's going on. They wonder, what's the angle here? They were a little bit. That's practicing. This woman was challenged to do something different than what she had been doing as director of this financial group within the business. And she didn't like it. It's not me. She said it, pardon? She?
Took her out of her comfort zone.
Oh my goodness. She was completely uncomfortable. But at the end of that 2-year period of classroom and reflection and study and application, she said, I used to lead with my mind, I now lead with my heart. It changed. Her set of assumptions changed. And that's what happens. We test them. We don't like them, we test. Why? Because we practice. Tanchilkin didn't want to do this. He wanted to do this. That feels ridiculous. I'm not comfortable. Try it. Just try it. You better try it or you might be on the bench. And he started. And finally, okay, I see what you're getting at. You practice. And then what happens? That's what happened to that woman I told you about. It became her default. That's who I am now as a leader because of this process that I went through. And so on. The process doesn't stop. Didn't somebody say that? Doesn't stop. Continuous improvement. How can we enhance the process? Knowledge without application is useless. That's from the book. Mark, any comments? None. How about it? Do you agree? That's what the authors say. Why do you agree? Saw some nodding of heads, and I don't think it was due to drowsiness at this point, I'm hoping. Go ahead, Eric.
If you don't apply the knowledge, I mean, then what good is it really to have it?
Okay. Lots of people think that knowledge is good in and of itself. We're saying something different here, aren't we? We're saying, Shelby, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, if you don't apply what you've learned, you don't know if your leadership is influencing other folks.
Okay. And if you believe that part of the leadership stick is to influence people, if that's part of your understanding, then you're saying, yeah, how do you know? What are we doing? We're taking ideas from, 30,000 feet, right? And we're saying, what do they look like on the ground? Yes?
Knowledge is only potential power.
Knowledge is only potential power.
Yeah, so if you don't apply it, it doesn't change anything.
Yeah, this is our laboratory. We want to see, does it make a difference? Does this information make a difference? Does it create change in me? Does it create change in others? Eric?
When I see that, I can kind of go to the next level, and that's wisdom. Wisdom is defined as the application of knowledge. So without applying the knowledge, you can't gain wisdom.
You can't get the insight of how that knowledge works in real life. Studies show that deliberate practice, not natural-born ability, is the real key to outstanding performance. So we're back to that concept that we talked about right at the beginning. What is deliberate practice? What is that deliberate process? Feedback is the breakfast of champions. Now we're going to talk about feedback for a few minutes. Feedback. How many of you don't raise your hand, like to get feedback all the time? You have to have it. You cannot proceed.
Only positive feedback.
What's our problem with feedback?
Take it too personal.
We take it personally. It is so difficult to keep that kind of information at the cognitive level, right? The mind level. I understand, this is not about me as an individual. It's about something else that we are talking about here. It's not necessarily about my identity as a human being. It's about something else. Feedback regarding performance, or feedback regarding perspective, attitude, whatever it might be. Oh boy. We take it personally. What do you need to develop in order to want to take feedback as a leader? Yes.
I think this happens in different aspects of our life, but the feedback is so essential, but there's often a time lag between intent or action and the result, which can be confusing or unrecognized. So if you get, I think you had mentioned about if you have somebody following you around and giving you feedback, if you get immediate feedback, that really enhances learning.
Oh, it does.
Immediacy that you recognize this and the outcome, versus delayed feedback can be hard to trace back and delineate what it was that you did that produced that. I see that a lot in the health world as well. So I think feedback is desired, but the immediacy of feedback and feedback from a source that maybe has your best interest in mind, that you have that trust and our ability to receive criticism effectively is very, very powerful.
Absolutely. And so we talk about the quality of feedback, we talk about the way feedback is given, in addition to how it's received. We have to be, if leaders are going to, if people are going to engage in this continuous process, improvement process, there has to be a certain level of security in your own skin. There has to be a courage, a willingness to say, okay, I will take the hits and I won't react. I am not going to explode. I am not going to create risk for the person who's giving me that feedback when I have asked for it. I know of too many stories where people say, oh, yeah, I want to hear it, I want to hear it. And they hear it and they just say, you are kidding me. That is the most ridiculous thing. And again, I laugh too. But for the people in that situation, they're stunned. What am I supposed to do? You asked me for feedback and you've just rejected everything, anything that I have to say about this, even though you wanted it. I'm not going to ever do anything like that again, my friend. Don't come to me. That happens. It's sort of pseudo feedback. I want pseudo feedback, you know. It doesn't work that way. But you have to create an atmosphere of authenticity and transparency and willingness to get that. The eye in the sky does not lie, are those people that you ask for feedback. The eye in the sky is the video camera that videotapes practices and games and everything. You know, when I played and coached, I wish we'd have had that kind of video. Boy, would that have been fun. Boy, did you screw up there. You know, we would have laughed at each other. But we would have gotten better because we could actually see, oh my goodness, is that what you were trying to tell me I was doing during the game? And I couldn't figure it out. Whew. Boy, I didn't have that. We didn't have that available, but that's the eye in the sky. Mark?
Just a quick, funny little story. Touch tells a story that, the first practice day after a game, the linemen would all get together and watch film of the game. And for linemen, your name only gets called on a penalty or when you give up a sack. So there's no upside to any of this. It's all downside. And each play, you would have to watch it 5 times. You watch it first, you watch the left tackle, what he did. And you rewatch the play and watch the left guard and see what he did. And then you repeat it in the group. And then the center, and then the right guard. And then if you made a mistake, you had to watch it 5 times in front of your peers and your coaches and hear all the criticism of what you did wrong and probably not a whole lot of what you did right. Although the Steelers were pretty good about affirming what you did right. But the eye in the sky was...
Doesn't lie.
Brutal.
Does not lie.
Feedback.
Yep. Top 2 constraints to improving leader performance are the absence of a coaching plan of some sort, and the absence of a huddle. Now, what's the huddle? The huddle is that group of people that you feel confident in and safe getting honest feedback. Do you have a huddle? Could you identify a huddle? Could you find people that you would feel that way about and say, I want to know how I'm doing. I want to know, I want to hear, tell me what's going on when I try these things. Tell me how I'm doing. It's difficult to change. Attitude, perspective changes, attitude, and then behavior. Boy, that's tough. Daniel Goleman, in his article right after his book came out on emotional intelligence, said the story of an upper level, VP, C level, whatever, and he did a 360 thing, and it was just he got very negative feedback, and he was outraged, so to speak, and he went home and told his family, and they said, they're right. So he said, okay, I'm going to try to change. Got a coach, intensive, regularly during the week, shadowing feedback. Goleman said in 6 months he began to make progress in some of the areas. So it's a challenge. A plan. Who said we need a plan? We've heard that. You've got to have a plan for this. It has to be intentional. Leadership development never ends. If you stay where you are, I've been in my position for 10 years and I'm cool. Leadership development is a continuous process. Continuous. It is something that you plan. Reflection, reflection, reflection. How does this transformation occur? Because you are reflecting like crazy. You're wondering what's going on. What's happening as I wonder about these assumptions and practice and this behavior? What about the feedback again? And what am I thinking about? What's going on in my head? Do I like it? Do I not? That's how, and we're not taught to be reflective. We aren't. In school, generally, no, don't reflect, just tell me what you know based on